Hello, I'm Senator Brian Jones, and I'm joined today by Robert Wynne, a fire captain. And we're going to have a discussion today about his life and here in California and why he believes in the California dream and what's going on. Robert, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Senator Jones, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, our meeting was serendipitous, I believe, several weeks ago when we were out shooting on the Capitol lawn and you walked by with your kids and had one in a stroller. And then we just had a quick conversation, so I've been looking forward to catching up on that and talking some more about your life here in California.
Yeah, I believe that you were shooting a video for a high school down in San Diego because you couldn't be down there for their graduation.
Right.
So super big moment, and it was pretty cool to see you giving back even though you couldn't be there personally.
Yeah, that's an annual thing that we do for that particular high school, and it's an honor every year that they ask me to do it. And they keep asking me to do it too, so I haven't messed it up to the point where they can't use
That's
it
a good
anymore.
thing.
So, one of the things you shared that day when we met was kind of your background being incarcerated, getting in trouble with the law, and then getting out of prison and becoming a firefighter. And then your faith walk as well. So let's first, if you kind of just give us a 30,000-foot level of going through the incarceration process, getting out of the incarceration situation, and into a professional career firefighting.
Yeah, so I think one important element to highlight is just going back to the trauma and early childhood exposures that I had to unbalance or not so good environment. That's really where it all started for me. And then dealing with a lot of those things and not managing them correctly, having a broken home kind of led me down a path where I had sought out other relationships with other individuals that were not good for me.
Right.
And not good for anybody. Started making decisions that were based off of acceptance and trying to fill the void of having a broken home. Early in my younger adulthood, I wanted to seek out a relationship with my father since I never had one, and my dad was involved in the streets. My dad was on drugs, and I eventually wound up doing drugs with my father. I was on methamphetamine for about 8 to 10 months, and shortly after that, I committed a crime. I was charged with robbery, PC 213 with a 4-year gun enhancement. I was sentenced to 10 years in state prison. There were two other individuals that were with me as well, and that was my first exposure to the criminal justice system in the state of California with going to the state penitentiary. Mm-hmm. I served 7.5 years of that 10 years.
So this was your first offense. You never had gotten in trouble before that?
Reckless driving and possession of marijuana.
Wow, okay. All right, so they kind of threw the book at you, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay.
And my thought process then was completely different than what it is now.
Right.
I'm very grateful for that opportunity. We spoke of my faith. God had definitely allowed me to break some of those chains that were rooted deep in my heart from that early childhood trauma. Right. And I'm very fortunate for it. And some of the programs that were offered while being incarcerated, I took full advantage of. I started doing self-help groups. I started taking anger management, co-parenting, parenting, like anything that I could to reflect on who I was as a human being. And in that, it wasn't me finding out who I was. It was me unbecoming everything that I wasn't.
Right.
And because of those programs, I was very fortunate to really kind of understand who I was and where my role was with being a good citizen in society. One of those in particular was the fire program. So CDCR offers the California Conservation through being on a hand crew or being at a firehouse. So I was at a firehouse at Chuckawalla Valley State Prison. The opportunity was presented to me when my points dropped from level 2 down to level 1, and I was able to choose a prison of minimum security, and I chose Chuckawalla because they had just redid their whole fire program.
Okay.
And I went there, I interviewed with the fire captain there, and within 2 months I was assigned to the firehouse. And my first impression of the firehouse was me leaving the secure facility, driving through the Sally Port, outside the prison gates, into a firehouse, watching a group of young men and fire captains out.
And how long had you been incarcerated at that point in time when that happened?
Roughly about 5 years.
Okay, so when you leave the prison for the first time to go to the firehouse, what was that feeling like? What did you go through emotionally? spiritually, maybe even intuitionally, intellectually? What was that?
Emotionally and mentally, it was really overwhelming. In those type of places, everybody gets a habit of suppressing their emotions. It's not a place that emotions are shared freely. People take advantage of them all the time in that type of environment. So leaving that Sallyport, it was almost like I was leaving a part of my life behind, life that I've known for the last 5 years, and almost stepping into a new life, a new beginning. And that's exactly what it was. That environment was different. The sole purpose of everybody at that institution was to provide fire protection and life safety to the institutions and to the surrounding county and city of Blythe.
So when you're in that fire station, is it a public fire station? I mean, are you answering calls out in the general public, or are you answering calls just in the prison, or what kind of calls are you going to?
So they had 2 fire engines there. They had 1 to 2 fire captains on duty. They were sworn peace officers, so they were correctional officers. So we didn't need a correctional officer to supervise us at night. This was a fire station that was on the prison grounds. It belonged to the state. The equipment belonged to the state, and the employees there belonged to the state. And with that being said, there was a primary engine and a secondary engine. The primary was the first engine out, and the primary responsibility is for both Chuckawalla Valley State Prison and Ironwood State Prison. So any fire or EMS-related calls, that would be the primary response. Okay. If there was a 911 call that came in within our response area of the city of Blythe or county of Blythe, we would be an automatic aid to county fire on Interstate 10.
So you are dealing with the public on some calls. You're out in the general public, dealing with the public, and so you've to get to that point as being incarcerated, you've developed some trust with the system, I guess, for lack of a better term, that you're going to do what you're tasked to do and not take off.
Yeah, and I'd have to say that the responsibility was pretty heavy. The emotions of going out into society after being incarcerated and not having any social skills or anything like that definitely took a little bit to get over.
Right.
But the fire service, as I like to say now, working in the fire service doesn't owe me anything. I owe everything to the fire service. Just the relationships that I was able to develop, the social confidence that I was able to develop while being incarcerated and actually helping people in their worst time. That program changed my entire life. I was there since February 2016 till the day I paroled of August 13, 2018. Okay. So a little over 6 years I've been free living in California as a taxpaying citizen, and it feels really good to say that.
Tell us, maybe one extraordinary example of either a training thing, something that somebody mentored you in that was like a light bulb went off and you never heard that before, and you were able to apply it to your life, or an interaction with somebody in the public that was memorable and made an impression on you.
So 2 things stick out to me. One was the fire captains that were there. I use the watering method, as I like to share with people these days, is they continuously wanted to fill your cup. They understood that people make mistakes. They understand that people may have rough childhoods and they make poor decisions. And these fire captains, their primary responsibility was to serve the people that they were entrusted in servicing.
And are those fire captains former incarcerated as well, or they've come up through the fire service and have chosen for that duty?
They've chosen that for their duty. They're not formally incarcerated.
Okay. Right. How high of a rank can you go in the fire system?
While being incarcerated, they have firefighter positions, and then they had fire apparatus engineer position.
So you can drive?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
We can drive on the prison property. We couldn't drive on public roads.
Got it. Okay. All right, and then maybe a quick interaction in the public that kind of helped a light bulb go off, that you knew that, okay, I'm in the right place doing the right thing.
Oh, man, there's really too many to recall. A lot of the accidents that we went to, they were really, really horrible accidents on Interstate 10. People can typically go a little faster than the speed limit there. There's one call in particular. Unfortunately, the 4-year-old child didn't make it. And in that moment, having a family, everybody asking for help and just being there to comfort somebody. But it goes back to those fire captains that they lived a life that was worthy and noble.
Right.
when they would come into work and they would share what they did on their weekend or what they did with their kids or the things that they were able to do and the way that they provide for their children is something that really clicked in my mind.
That's good.
For me to understand that this is what I want to do. Both. I want to be able to give back to society, and I also want to be able to serve society.
That's awesome. You know, when we met out there and then listening to your podcasts, you know, one of the things that obviously is very important to you is faith. I mean, just kind of, you're very comfortable expressing that. Walk us, you know, through that. You know, what's your faith story? Where did it start? You know, what was the change and where are you at now?
There's this funny saying, well, most people are incarcerated that they always just want to go to church. They want to find a Jesus or whoever
Right.
they're
Somebody get them out of there.
Somebody get me out of here. And
I would be like that.
Unfortunately, you know, I had that same mindset. I never in a million years did I think I was going to be incarcerated. But it happened. And there was someone that was next to me in my cell that would always go to church. And he invited me to church one day. Now, in prison, church is a way for you to get out of your cell.
And you can go to church anytime, or there's specific times?
There's specific times. Okay. And he handed me a daily bread, and he handed me a Bible. And he said, just start with the daily breads. And so that's what I did. And there was a time in prison where I almost lost my life. I was stabbed 7 times. I was flown out in a helicopter. I was in administrative segregation for a long period of time. And that's where I found Christ. It was the most quiet place that you could ever imagine. You are locked in a cell for 23 hours a day. And
I can't even imagine that.
You only go outside for what they call PT or recreational use to get some sunlight and work out a little bit. I started reading books, and the book that I found most interesting was the Bible. Mm-hmm. And I started at the very beginning. And I read the Bible, and I started praying. I started meditating on the daily breads that I read in that morning, just trying to stay in a healthy mindset with writing letters to my family and things like that. And in that moment, in the quietest moments, I heard a very small voice say, turn to me. I didn't know what it was. I mean, you can hear the correction officer's keys jingling from a mile away.
Right.
And there's nobody else in this cell with me.
Right.
And I know that my neighbor's not talking to me through the vent. And I knew right then and there that it was God.
That's awesome.
It was Christ saying, come to me. And that's what I did. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It was one of the most hardest things that I ever had to do in my life, was completely disengage from those things that I struggled with my entire life, with abandonment and neglect and acceptance issues. And I found my comfort in God and my trust in Him, knowing that I was worthy, knowing that I was accepted, knowing that I was not going to be neglected by my Heavenly Father.
You mentioned your cellmate. Did that person mentor you into faith, or how did you grow from that point? From the time you accepted Christ, how did you continue to grow in faith while you were incarcerated?
We used to do these Bible studies, and I believe in transparency and vulnerability. I think those are two characteristics of anybody that they should have in their life. So being vulnerable, being able to be in a prison where vulnerability and transparency can be seen as a weakness. And we would do these Bible studies and not care what 1,000 other grown men were thinking. And we are all broken. We all have history. We all have a past. We've all been exposed to different traumas. We've all done horrible things. But in that moment that we came together, we knew that we were created whole in Christ. And that was where I found the most fulfilling things, coming together with 5 or 6 other men talking about the Bible and how it applies to our life. And that's where the foundation was really laid for me to stand on the Word and the Word alone.
And how do you apply that now? What's the main expression of your faith now?
The main expression is my faith is just making sure we're living out what the Bible asks us to live out every day. And so what that means to be a husband, what that means to be a father. And we all fall short.
Right.
We all fail in many areas. And just knowing that we have a God that is forgiving and that we are made whole in Him, and that the greatest is love. How can I love my wife and my kids through anything that they're going through? And then outside of that, we have a great church home. And we surround ourselves around other people that are faith-based as well. For our children, we implement that in bite sizes. Their attention span is really small.
Sure. Yep.
I have a 3-year-old, a 17-month-old, and a 2-month-old. So giving them a lecture on the 10 Commandments is not going to happen. But we implement that in allowing my 3-year-old to lead prayer at dinner.
That's great.
And reading a small portion of the daily bread to them at night and giving it to them in bite-sized pieces so they're not totally foreign to it.
Are you at a point where you're able to mentor other young men that are in the situation you're in yet, or that's something maybe down the road yet to come?
Yeah, I've reached out to many different people, a lot of people within my agency, as well as relationships that I've been able to develop. My biggest thing is that I want to help people become better people, whether it's in the fire service, whether it's in law enforcement. It doesn't matter what it is. How can I help you break that stronghold that maybe the enemy or the evil side of things has gotten a hold of you and you don't know how to shake it?
Right.
I can share through vulnerability and transparency that if God has been able to work on me through the things that I've been exposed to through my childhood and my young adult life, that He can set you free too.
Obviously, you're growing. You're following God, and the most important thing you're doing is making sure that core of your family is protected and taken care of first. And that's really one of the things that we need every man to do in America, is take care of their family first, and then we can fix the rest of the culture after that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Let's segue into, one of the things that really piqued my interest that day we met was when you learned I was the Republican leader for the state. You were kind of like excited about that, and I'm not used to that reaction, to tell you the truth. Usually it's scourge and dismay.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Republicans in California. How did you get in a position of doing all of this other stuff that you're overcoming and get interested in politics?
The Republican Party is attractive to me for many reasons, and a lot of those are just simply the shared values that I have as a human being, as a husband, and as a father. It always hasn't been that way.
Right.
My family was broken. They relied heavily on the government to help them out with the different assistance programs and welfare and things like that, the court systems, and going through that as a child, as well as my wife. My wife went through foster care, multiple foster care homes. And once we got together, we sat down and we talked about our morals and values. And we understand that everybody has a vote, and it's really important that everybody is heard. Because of the exposure that we had to government and the way that government had, in a sense, destroyed or enabled our family to not take that next step, to not have ownership of their own accomplishments or successes, we decided that we weren't going to side with the other side.
Right.
And so when I say that the Republican Party is attractive to me, it's simply the first thing that comes to mind is the true value of family and what that means.
Right. Interesting. That's obviously you have a very unique story, so your story of how to get there is going to be very unique as well. What is one thing that you think the Democrat Party in California does well?
Well, I think that the Democrats do one thing well, and that's spread their agenda like wildfire.
Okay.
I think that they have many outlets to help push their narrative or their agenda. Not that it's right, wrong, or indifferent.
Right.
I think that they've been able to kind of master that in a way.
So, and then on the flip side of that, what's one thing in California that you think the Republicans do well?
They're still fighting.
What do you see them fighting for?
Less government, lower taxes, and the opportunity for people to be successful in ways that doesn't involve the government telling them how they're going to be successful.
Okay.
They're still fighting, and that's important to me.
Right.
That's important to me as a 35-year-old man who's married, who has children, who wants ownership of all the things that are important to him and wants to continue to develop assets for his children. One thing that I wrote down in my notes is, what kind of California do I want for my children and grandchildren? Like, the decisions and choices that we make today are going to ultimately affect the type of California that our children and great-grandchildren are living in. That's important to me. And the fact that Republicans are still fighting for those true traditional values and lowering the cost of a lot of different things to help the middle working class, the people who are impacted the most, it gives me hope.
So then the other flip side of that coin, the next question is, what's one thing that the Republican Party in California could do better?
as a person who sides with the Republican views, I just think that we need to be more involved, not necessarily the Republican Party or the government, the legislators, senators, or assembly members. I think that it's going to take us collectively developing relationships with people up and down the state of California to really bring back the morals and values that we once stood on.
That's right in line with whenever I speak to a group of Republicans, that's exactly what I say, almost verbatim. Do you think that you might someday run for office?
I think so.
If you did that, one of the things that people keeps them from running is, I don't want my life out there, and most people don't have anything that really should be bothersome for them to run. They just use it as an excuse. But you got some real baggage, some stuff out there. That's going to come out. Are you worried about that? Are you concerned about that?
Everybody asks me that. Other people ask me, what's it like working in the fire service with a background? There's this myth out there that people get looked down on if you have a felony record or you've been convicted of a crime. And the truth of the matter is, it's important for me to know who I was, where I've been, who I am today, and where I'm going. And I know who I am today. And my personal morals and values are important to me, and I think that my personal morals and values with the life that I had and how I've been able to overcome those things could actually help out people in this state and throughout this country.
That's a great answer. And look, we all have baggage. Every single person has something that can come up, could come up, and owning it and telling the story about it really, I think, resonates with voters, makes you a real person, and shows that how we start isn't the way we have to finish.
Yes.
We can change our finish. We live in California. It's a tough state to live in. Lots of people are thinking about moving out of state to someplace else. Obviously, doesn't seem like that's you. You love California. You're stuck on California. What is your hope for the future for California? One or two or three things that the government can address to make California more livable, or why are you so hopeful about California?
There was a point in my life where I wasn't hopeful at all, but God intervened and He gave me hope. He showed me a path. And there's one word that comes up, and that word is trust. I think right now, California, doesn't matter what side you're on, that word trust is starting to diminish. And results move at the speed of relationships, and relationships move at the speed of trust. So the farther that we dive into gaining the trust back of the people and really giving them a path of what success looks like in California, affordability, lower taxes, actually doing what's right for the taxpayers of this state, then that gives me a lot of hope. It's not that it's over. It's just that we need to pivot. And what that pivot looks like is just having truthful conversations with transparency from government, understanding what their objectives are for the betterment of the people who actually live in this state. We need Republicans in our state's leadership to bring back trust to the hardworking Americans who struggle to get by under the Democratic leadership.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that's one of the things we're working on. Our responsibility in that is, first of all, to do it, right? And there are a lot of new Republican leaders that are working towards that. And the second thing we have to do is make sure we're getting that message out that it's actually happening. And that's kind of the part where we've struggled historically, but I think we're turning the corner on that as well, on the messaging. Robert, I'll tell you what, one of the things that sometimes I run low on is hope. But you've re-energized me and really blessed me today, and I hope that whoever gets to see this will be blessed as well. And I look forward to staying in touch with you for a long time and building a long-time friendship out of this.
Thank you, Senator Jones.
You bet.